I'm Frederick Gerten, and I'm the filmmaker.
And I'm Leilani Farha, and I'm the advocate.
So this is like we're rolling again.
Here we are.
And it's in the darkness of winter, and you're really lonely, Leilani. You were like really lonely this week.
I'm lonely this morning in particular. No dog.
No dog.
I sent my dog away. There's other loneliness, the loneliness of leadership, for sure. But no, but without the dog, it's doubly lonely. No bean.
Yeah. But you're the global director of The Shift, and before you were the UN Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing. But you, since I know you, you basically mostly worked by yourself in this bunker in Ottawa you're talking from. This is like your place when you're, because before you were traveling a lot. So how is this? Don't you have a big office with a lot of people?
Well, it's not that I don't have some people, but we're all scattered around the world, the shifters. But yeah, it's been a lot of time in my basement since the pandemic struck, for sure. In my bunker, as you call it. But the shift is growing. We've got some people. They're just not here with me.
And what's cooking right now?
Something kind of exciting, actually. We were approached by the Open Society Foundation. For those of you who know it, it's George Soros's baby, shall we say, because it became clear to a bunch of us that governments are struggling with this pandemic and not doing what they should do to protect the right to housing for tenants and people living in homelessness and in informal settlements. So we came together and we have crafted model emergency right to housing legislation, and we're about to launch it. So it's pretty exciting, and we're hoping advocates will use it and, to try to push their governments to get better legislation, and that maybe some governments will find it interesting and adopt some of the provisions, if not the whole thing. So it's pretty cool.
And you're a lawyer, so legislation is something it's kind of important to have laws on your side, I guess. For all of us.
Yeah, and it's pretty fun to try to invent them. It's not very often you get to sit down and just write some law. It was a tough process because there was a whole group of us working together, and everyone has different ideas. But it was fun, and it's, you see how possible it is to craft really cool, good legislation to protect people.
Wow! So this is what we all should do. We should do more laws. We should all get into. Maybe it might be a bit too late for me to become a lawyer, but anyway, I can still make my films. So I'm the film director. You're like the global director, and now we are going to talk to a young woman who is the deputy director of The Shift. And this is a woman we know since before. But first of all, we're going to go all the way back to Barcelona, to the first meeting of The Shift, which we actually can see and push the film.
It was really incredible to see you and Ada there. You don't get that often. To see two women, children, and to have that moment too where you can talk about your kids and talk about changing the world from one breath to another is not something you see. It feels like it was so tiny.
Before we got here. And then now it's like...
So it's like the mayor of Barcelona is maybe going to pitch this to the mayor of New York, mayor of London.
So the question is, the big question, Julie. Are you up for it?
No, I'm up for it.
Julieta, Perucc, welcome to Pushback Talks.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Emotional moments in Barcelona. And I apologize the bad sound because we actually had taken off the law mics and we were done with the shoot and you were drinking wine. Leilani went off crying, of course. And But then when I saw the situation, because we were shooting some other stuff around that square, and I thought, shit, this is actually a very nice situation. And I asked the crew to come back, but then with a boom mic. And you were like summing up a day at this meeting in Barcelona with meeting with the mayor Ada Colau and a lot of other important people. It was like a big relief. Both of you have moved somewhere. So do you remember that day, Julie?
I mean, I don't think I'll ever forget that day. Despite being jet lagged, I think I had just arrived. I only knew I was going to Barcelona 24 hours beforehand. I had just arrived. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, I don't think. I mean, absolutely no idea. And I mean, after going through this incredible day with Ada Colau and seeing Leilani really in action for the first time, because that was the first trip I've ever taken with Leilani, I think that night, those tears were just kind of an expression of the awe that I had for Leilani, for our work, for everything.
Cool. It was really, I mean, it was the first time I met you. I knew that you, Leilani, had an assistant sitting in Ottawa, helping her to book her totally crazy life. And then suddenly she invited you to Barcelona, which was actually very smart, because you were also direct translating the into Spanish, because you are Argentinian from birth. So it was you had a very cool role to play also at this top meeting that happened in Barcelona.
Incredible role. I think I got to sit in one of the fanciest lunches I've ever had because I had to translate for Leilani, which I don't think anybody would have had that opportunity to do had it not been for those skills. But man, did I learn a lot as well.
Full of emotion, thinking back to those days and that particular trip. I mean, one of the things that's so interesting about the clip that you played is, I never consider myself to be a role model for anyone. I don't think about the fact that I'm doing all this with children and that I'm a woman and that means something. And Julieta brought that home to me. I mean, of course, I don't ever want to be self-conscious and like, I'm the role model. That's so ridiculous. And if you saw how I led my life, I'm, of course, no role model for anyone. So in that way, it's like, I mean, my work habits are crazy. My lack of engagement with my family when I'm traveling is bad. Like, there's so many things that I am not a role model. So, but there was a moment there for me where I realized, okay, even if I resist that, young women see me differently than I see myself. And that's super important. And I have to take that very seriously. It was a real moment for me at the time. And then watching the film, of course, I've seen it many times now. Every time I see that, I'm like, right. There's something really important about the relationship between younger women and older women who are trying to make it in the world and try to make a difference in the world.
How did you see that how did you get the job with Leilani in the first place, Julie?
Oh my goodness, I just answered an Indeed ad. She put up a posting on the internet for an administrative assistant and finance person. And I had just moved to Ottawa. I had just moved back from finishing my law degree in the Netherlands. And we had professors that were special rapporteurs in my law school. I knew how prestigious the position was. And I also knew that I was never going to get a job in human rights because that's what everybody had told me forever. So I saw this position to be an administrative assistant for a UN special rapporteur. And I thought, I think it was for 10 hours a week. And I thought, I'm going to apply for this job and I am going to do everything I can to make myself indispensable.
And I had already done all of the interviews. Julieta and I still dispute this. I still say she submitted her application late. But in any event, I'd already interviewed everyone. And then this application came in and I was like, interesting. She had a background in European human rights law, which I know nothing about. And then the name, Julieta Perucc, there was something. And then when I interviewed her, she was super nervous in the cutest way. And we clicked. I think we just clicked. I just knew immediately this was going to be good. I didn't know how good.
Me neither.
And from the filmmaker's perspective, that's my perspective. I understood that this was a scene for like the later end of the film, and how do you end the film? And and I could really feel that you came in, Julie, with energy and hope in some way. Maybe it's a little bit naive in some way for us to put it like that, but we dive into so much darkness doing this kind of film, so we need light, and you became a part of that light in many ways. And as I met audiences all over the world, and a lot of, everybody is inspired by Leilani, but a lot of young people also get inspired by you, because you enter the scene and you take a space, and later on in the film, there is a scene from New York in the very end of the film. You say why language is so important. You speak straight into the very heart of the film and the very heart of the mission that you are working on now in the shift. So that's really cool. So thank you for being you, Julie. And it's so cool to have you here. This week, the week we are doing this podcast, because we're recording 1 week in advance, you are doing the very first mission of the shift, and it's a mission to Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, not only is it the first mission that the shift is doing, which is really exciting, to the metropolitan area of Buenos Aires, which I think accounts for about 30% of the entire population of the country, but it's also actually a virtual human rights mission, which I think is the first of its kind, right, Leilani?
I think so. The pandemic
let's call it the first
it.
in time in history. Don't be shy. If some other will claim that title, let them come and talk to us.
That's
This
right.
is the very first digital mission in the human rights history.
I think that's right. But we've managed,
like
it's been incredible. We've managed to do site visits via Zoom. We have videographers on the ground doing some taping for us. We've gotten together experts of all different kinds to come together on roundtables, many of which are public and available on YouTube.
So tell me, how would a day look like? Indeed, a site visit. What is a site visit?
So we've done 3 site visits. Basically, we log in to Zoom, much like we're doing right now. And then we have one of our partners on the ground who has his phone, and he basically takes us through communities, allows us to speak to residents through his phone. And we have a couple of translators that are also logged into the Zoom platform and are doing simultaneous translation. And then, we're just kind of seeing it as if we were in a real-time Zoom call on the ground.
Or like you did in the old time when you actually went to people's home and you had a lot of meetings with local residents. That's what I've seen you doing, Leilani, in your work, and sometimes together with you, when you actually go from house to house, you meet active residents, you meet normal people. You really try to go all the way out in society, all edges.
It's been interesting because, of course, we worried about how effective it would be, how real it would seem when you're doing everything using iPhones and it's all mediated through a lens and all of that. And I've been surprised at how emotional the content is still very emotional. Whether you're talking to someone through Zoom or not, and they are losing their home or about to lose their home because they're so indebted because of crazy mortgage rates, interest rates, it's the emotion is still there. And maybe even more importantly, the residents have indicated that talking to us has been hugely important to them. And I didn't know if they would feel that with all this mediated conversation through technology, but they still feel that they're being listened to, and maybe for the first time, and certainly for the first time by an international human rights team. And so that's really important to me, because that's what we want to do with these missions, with our work, is to provide a platform for people who don't otherwise have a voice, where, these are people who are on the margins of society. No one is listening to them, especially not governments, and we're trying to make that happen. So I've been super happy that the residents seem really like they're getting their chance.
And Julie, can you update us on what is the situation in Argentina right now? I mean, because we know that financialization is a story all over the world. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, but of course there's also a lot of specifics of every country. So give us an update on the situation in Argentina.
Yeah, I mean, I'm by no means an expert on the situation in Argentina, but I can tell you a little bit about some of the problems that we've heard about in Buenos Aires, and I think they're pretty massive. Because you have some terrible crises kind of coming together. So not only the pandemic, but you have an inflation crisis, a homelessness crisis, and a really pervasive housing crisis that are all just kind of bubbling and ready to explode. I think one of the most shocking things that we've heard that I thought has been really interesting is in 2016, they opened a mortgage market for people that were low and middle income, so that they could actually access housing for the first time and become homeowners. But the mortgages are actually tied to inflation rate. So we're seeing now about 25,000 households that have taken these mortgages out that are basically subprime mortgages or kind of predatory mortgages that will have experienced a terrible increase in their mortgage payments due to inflation. So we're talking about 40% increases, 60% increases. So where they were paying 2,000, say, pesos, they now have to pay 5,000 pesos, which of course is impossible for so many people living on teacher salaries, police salaries, etc.
It's all the people who run the city that have these mortgages. It's teachers, nurses, they said, firefighters, literally police officers, all of the people who are necessary for a city. And what made it so predatory, at least, and Julieta, you tell me if you agree, was that they were sold a dream. They were told, you will have security if you take one of these mortgages because you will be a home owner, and then your children will have security. And they sold them this dream, and none of the people who took the mortgages understood really. They thought there might be single digit inflation, 2%, 3%. That's like what we experience in developed countries, What they're experiencing, as Julieta just said, is double digit. In one case, they said there was 100% inflation. So I mean, imagine that. And then in the middle of a pandemic, now there's a decree saying, okay, no one will lose their home as a result of mortgage arrears during the pandemic, but the decree will be lifted. And then what? I mean, that you could feel the terror that these single mothers, young families were feeling as they were talking to us. It's really, I agree with Julieta, that's been the most stark thing that we've seen, I think, or the most surprising.
I can tell you, I mean, I did a film in Buenos Aires Metropolitan also 15 years ago. It's called An Ordinary Family. So where this is after the big financial crisis in 2001, where the Argentinian economy totally fell down, and they locked the banks. People's bank accounts got locked up. Their bank machines were locked. People are protesting outside the banks to get. Some people have moved back from the UK, 30 years in the UK, and put all the money into the bank. And now what they in the end got out was like a percentage of their savings, like 30% of their savings. And the banks or the government stole the rest of it. And what I took out from that experience is that the middle class, the class that we want to build a society on in many ways, can never be as smart as the big, they can't move money out somewhere. They have to they are depending on the system that is on the ground in the country. They have to trust the government, and this is happening all over the world, because when the stock market goes down, boom, who's losing and who's winning? Because I mean, we talk about Blackstone a lot here. I mean, they know exactly how to move and when to move. A policeman or a teacher or somebody like ourselves, there is no way for us to protect ourselves. We are a part of the system. It's a lot of, Argentinians have more experience of this in the history than most other countries in the world, because I've been there during hyperinflation in the 90s, so they've experienced everything. But still, if the state puts up a program and you trust it, then you shouldn't be left with a 60% increase of your mortgage.
Well, that's what makes these loans even more predatory, because people really, and I can tell you from my family's experience, people don't trust in any way of saving their money except putting it into housing. It's the only way that you can kind of preserve the value of your money. But one of the other conditions of these mortgages is if you actually have a mortgage, you're no longer able to buy dollars at the official exchange rate in official markets. So if you are no longer able to buy dollars, you also have no way of savings, because pesos obviously are devaluing by the second. So it becomes a really complex but a really efficient way to keep people in poverty.
So now you're there with the shift. You're meeting a lot of people. You're setting up panels. So what is the response? Is there a response coming from you now to the Argentinian government? What is the message?
Well, we have to meet with the Argentinian government, which is coming up. So we haven't yet had that opportunity. I think that they will be open to hearing from us. Frankly, I do. This is a government that's a little more open to this kind of conversation than Macri's government. There was a really huge eviction. So a lot of people really, what I call the refugees of COVID. The refugees of COVID have been occupying lands in and around Buenos Aires, so in the AMBA area. And we're talking about women who are experiencing domestic violence. We're talking about the poorest people who simply have nowhere to live, have occupied lands, put tents up. There was one really large one called Guernica, 1,400 families, very organized. They had organized themselves into neighborhoods. They were helping each other survive this pandemic and survive on these lands, which are very dangerous lands, actually. And there was a huge eviction with 6,000 police that came to dismantle these homes, and right in the middle of negotiations. It was really very terrible.
When was this? Quite recently?
Yeah, it was a couple of weeks ago. And the Shift wrote a statement. We knew we were coming to Buenos Aires for the mission, for the visit, and we thought we better, with Julieta leading, we said we better write a statement. So Julieta worked with local organizations, human rights organizations, and we wrote a statement and we put it out there. And I think that our statement was heard by government. And Julieta, maybe you can weigh in on that a little bit, because you know more than I do. But I think there's a sense that the government is listening. They know things have gone sideways.
Yeah, I'm not too sure how much I should weigh in from what I've been told, but I've heard that there has been a recent ministry reshuffle, particularly for the Minister of Housing, and we may have played a role in that. It was also kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, I think, after several months of mismanagement, particularly from the Ministry of Housing in Argentina. But I think what's really interesting for our discussion around these occupations of lands is that the reason why they're being so forcibly evicted is because there's actually private actors that are coming in and buying these kind of dangerous lands or lands in waste dumps, and actually creating gated communities on them, or they're buying them with the intent of creating gated communities, because they know that these lands is where they can actually have the highest profit margin. So it's the same lands that people who have absolutely nowhere to go actually go to occupy. And then the private market is now buying up these lands, and it's creating this terrible tension between private markets and the most elite in the country, as well as obviously the most disadvantaged with the most need.
And then I also know from Argentina that a lot of the new people coming into the big city are people who are being evicted from the countryside because the soya business is so big, and they are like grabbing land from small farmers who maybe don't have the papers on the land and so on. So actually there's a big influx of people into town because of the global agro business, which is a growing business. We've been talking about that in relation to Oatly and others. The agro business can be nice, but it can also be extremely brutal. And in Argentina, you can totally see that. Yeah. And when I was filming in Argentina 15 years ago, there was a lot of occupations in the old factory because there is like miles after miles of abandoned factories outside Buenos Aires because the textile industry was so strong. And now there's a lot of old structures lying there, and people are moving in and try to organize things. But of course, at one moment there will be some owner coming out and to kick them out. And I guess that is what's happening now.
Yeah. We were told that Buenos Aires is now its urban density is at 92%. So in other words, it's hugely urbanized area. So as you said, Frederick, it's all those agriculture workers moving into the city as they lose their employment. And they also told us that there are two main industries, soya and real estate. That's what's driving the economy, and I put economy in quotes because I think a lot of the real estate stuff is happening outside of formal economy, and is certainly part of sort of corrupt economies that happen on parallel in Argentina. It's yeah.
And you talked about also conflicts inside the classical city of Buenos Aires in the famous quarters of Retiro and Puerto Madero and so on. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I also find incredibly surprising from this visit is learning that the government is willing to upgrade informal settlements that are found within these very classical, wealthy neighborhoods of Buenos Aires, like Retiro or Puerto Madero. And they're upgrading these informal settlements and creating apartment buildings for people to go to in situ, on site. But the people are actually going to be able to sell the apartments within 5 years. And then the government, they have to first offer the apartment to the government, but then the government can sell it off to private actors. So it seems to me like and I might be speculating here, but there seems to me like there's a vested interest for the government to upgrade those informal settlements in wealthy neighborhoods, knowing that in 5 or 10 years' time, those apartment buildings can go into the speculative private market, and that then all of the residents of these neighborhoods will be pushed out.
Yeah, I think that's the intention. I have to say, Julieta and I haven't had a chance to confer. So that's interesting. We reached the same conclusion. I think that there's just so much pressure. The real estate pressure in Buenos Aires is very strong. And I think with this community being really adjacent to one of the most affluent communities in Buenos Aires, the pressure will be felt daily, I think. So for sure, they're making it a community that could turn into an affluent community.
Mm. So tell me about the resistance, Julie. Argentina is a country with a lot of strong social movements since always. So how is this movement reacting right now?
Yeah, I've been amazed. I mean, the communities are so incredibly organized. And we've seen it through the pandemic. I mean, we've seen community members, feminist movements, for example, really organizing within these popular neighborhoods, los barrios populares, and providing food services for people who don't have them, providing information on the pandemic, providing support to women and children experiencing violence. But specifically around the right to housing, I think it's worth noting that Argentina has pretty excellent constitutional framework. We have a constitutional right to housing. The city of Buenos Aires has a city charter that actually also enshrines the right to housing and the progressive realization of the right to housing. And I think the organizers on the ground have been amazing at using this legal framework and really organizing around the obligations that the government owes them. So I mean, I think that's one of the things that's been so impressive to me. But it's not only lawyers working together, but it's also urban planners working together, architects working together. What Leilani said about the occupied territory of Guernica, they actually had a whole urban plan for that territory. So they had planned out streets, they had planned out green spaces, and they had worked with architects and city planners to be able to give the government a model for what they needed out of that space. And that's kind of the process that they were out of negotiations before they were forcibly and violently evicted.
And what is the situation right now? So they're just empty spaces now? Or?
Just empty space.
But they said that they will continue to fight. I mean, it's again these people being sold something and believing so strongly. The residents of Guernica believed they would be able to stay there. They were in negotiations with the government. The government had said a certain number of families would be able to stay. And so I love the resistance that I've seen so far in Buenos Aires, because it's based on a notion of what should be. And that's based in the human right to housing. But it's this very strong, like, we should have this land. We should be able to dream about a home and for our children to have a decent home. And that really drives a lot of the, it's really ingrained in them, this sense of that they should be able to dream and those dreams should become real. And I really love that, because that has a different quality. That has such a strong emotional quality that can really make change.
If now the listeners of Pushback Talks would like to know more about your Argentina missions, is there a website that can they go somewhere to find out more? Because it's like we are dropping a lot of interesting stuff. Do you put something up here on? Tell us. Yeah,
so we're going to have something. We're having daily updates on Twitter, so you can follow at make_the_shift, as well as Leilani's Twitter at Leilani Farha, I think.
It is.
And then we're also going to be uploading our final report on our website, which is www.maketheshift.org. And I would also strongly recommend people follow our partners ACIJ, ACIJ, and CEAPI, CEAPI. They're both incredible organizations working on the ground. I really can't speak highly enough about them.
We will put the information up on the blurb around if you go to this podcast, and we will try to put addresses out.
Yeah, and we're hoping to create some video like a few short videos of the visit, so people can actually see and get a sense of the communities. And
also the sense of your work, of course. So now, Julie, we started off when you just hired for 10 hours a week, and then you suddenly landed in Barcelona, and then we met in Seoul, Korea, we met in New York, and then we met at the premiere in Copenhagen, then in Toronto. And suddenly now you're the deputy director of the Shift. You're based in Geneva, Switzerland, and you're leading a mission to your parents' home country, Argentina. How is it? You're doing fine.
I don't know. I am the luckiest girl in the entire world. I don't know how I got to be so lucky. I mean, aside from what you said, I've had the possibility to go to COP25 and COP26. We're now leading work on right to housing and climate change. And I've been able to learn from possibly the best teacher that there is. I didn't know anything about the right to housing before this, and Leilani, I'm so lucky and eternally grateful.
She's so lucky. This is a young woman who works 12 hours at least every day, day in and day out, even on weekends. So as lucky as she says she is, it's because of her incredible honestly, I've not seen such commitment, and not just that she's committed, she's really good at what she does. So she is driving the shift forward, and working so hard. So for all of the amazingness of it, Julieta, you know how hard it is.
Are you actually saying it's good to work 12 hours a day? Is that what you're telling young girls out there?
No, of course not. No.
It's like, come on.
Work-life balance is key, but at the same time...
You should tell Julie, have a break, drink wine.
Yes, we do that.
Not acceptable. I mean, sometimes we should work long hours. It also happens to me.
Yeah.
But we should also not only praise to work the asses, it's too much. So anyway,
it is too much.
But that while it's too much, I have to say, I mean, when there is hope and when you feel like you can make change, even the smallest amount of change, it's really hard to insert some work-life balance because that's what you want to do. I mean, you want to make these dreams come true. So
that's cool. And and Argentina has a very special place in my heart. And I will send you. I mean, you can go to the wgfilm.com website, and there are all of my old films. But look for An Ordinary Family. The family ended up losing their home, and all the money they could get from their home was 5 airplane tickets to Spain, one-way tickets. And it was a big, big, big house with a big, big, big garden. So it's and this was a family that the guy was the CEO of an oil company. He got fired. He lost the job in the crisis, and then he started up a little small company in the travel business. And in the end, he was selling sunglasses at the street crossings. And in the end, they had to leave the country with nothing. So and I can really see this, that the middle class is, and of course the poor class are always even worse. But if you want to build a society based on a class that is educating kids to go on and grow, it's not working if you sell them out time after time, I would say.
Yeah.
Wow. We are pushing forward with our pushback talks. Do you listen to us a lot, Julie?
Every Friday at noon.
Every
while
Friday.
I walk my dog.
So So what do you think? Are we doing fine?
You
Give
guys
us
are
something.
amazing. Your trajectory has been incredible. No, I'm really enjoying it, and I'm learning a lot. Which, this counts as my break, though, Fredrik. So
you walk the dog and you listen to us. Yeah, that's good. So we have a lot of. I don't have a dog, but I have my bike. It's good enough.
That's good. But the best part is when I forget that I actually know you both, and it just feels like I'm listening to a podcast.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, so what do you say? We should maybe you should go to Buenos Aires, and I'm happy that you're using Push in Buenos Aires right now, and you want me to be in a panel.
You're joining us, Fredrik. You're joining us in Buenos Aires.
I'm going to be in a panel, and I'm going to speak Spanish. Voy a hablar español todo el tiempo, para que sepas, ¿no? Muy bien. Okay, so hasta la vista, hasta la próxima, Leilani, and hope to see you.
No update on our Patreons, Fredrik, or any increase?
Yeah, we're actually up to 20 patrons right now, and we are still at 93 countries of listeners. And if you Canadians want to be, I can tell you, you're now down to number 4. Sweden is still in the lead, UK number 2, and now the US number 3, and then we have Canada, and then little jump down to Germany and the Netherlands and so on. But so Canada, you have to, if you want to beat the Americans, you better go now, Canada.
Yeah, go Canada.
Go Canada. Or walk the dog. Or no.
No dog.
No dog.
Have another cup of tea.
Have another cup of tea. And thank you very much, Julie, and talk soon. Ciao.
Thanks, Julieta. See you soon.
Bye.
Pushback Talks is produced by WG Film. To watch Push, visit pushthefilm.com. You can also support us by becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/pushbacktalks. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.